Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. In 1912, there was a ship on the seas that many experts claimed to be unsinkable. It was, if you will, a modern wonder of the world, a floating palace, and would be expected to be a mighty vessel enjoyed by thousands for decades to come on the seas. In April of that year, this massive cruiser made its maiden voyage from England to New York City, but about 2/3 of the way there, the ship infamously hit an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sank to the bottom of the ocean. And this was, of course, one of the most famous and tragic incidences in maritime history, where 1,500 people died in this tragedy, the sinking of the boat many claimed to be unsinkable, the R.M.S. Titanic. So the massive vessel was in many ways the product of a cultural arms race of industry that had been ongoing really since the mid-19th century in the West. Business tycoons wanted a chance to create massive ships that could transport thousands of people in a rather luxurious style. So the Titanic was constructed under the ownership of White Star Line, which, interestingly enough, was funded by the infamous American business tycoon J.P. Morgan. Titanic was built alongside a sister ship called Olympic, and the vessel spanned a whopping 882 feet in length and almost 100 feet across at its widest point, leaving it as the largest luxury liner in the world at that time. So in April of 1912, with much pomp and celebration, the Titanic embarked on her maiden voyage in what would also be her last voyage, traveling from Southampton, England, for the intended target of New York City. Now, for several days, the journey was rather calm. Now, while there were many elites on board, there were also a great number of middle and lower class citizens who were hoping for a fresh start in the United States. Now, about 2/3 of the way to Ellis Island in the Atlantic, the Titanic famously came upon an unforeseen iceberg in the dead of night. Desperate to avoid a crash, the ship's crew tried to avert the massive vessel, but to no avail. The iceberg tore open the side of the ship, and the infamous watertight compartments, which were part of the reason why many had deemed the Titanic as unsinkable, began to fill. Not long after, word reached the captain and the rest of the crew that the ship was indeed going down. So now, in one of the great tragedies of history, the Titanic was grossly ill-prepared for such an occasion. There were lifeboats available for only little more than half of the passengers on board, which meant that the rule of thumb was women and children first, and men only if there was room. Now, due to the chaos of the situation, many boats left the sinking vessel only a half or quarter full. As the ship filled with water, one end began to point upwards while the other submerged in the dark, cold Atlantic. After a few hours of desperate scrambling, the ship plunged under the water. Just more than 700 people lived to tell the tale, while almost 1,500 perished. Now, for over 70 years, the wreckage of the Titanic lay on the bottom of the North Atlantic, its whereabouts relatively unknown until it was dramatically rediscovered in 1985, which kind of remade a new fascination with the giant ship and the tragedy that surrounded it. Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History.